And welcome to the Norfolk Broads at Wroxham boating tour on the Belle of the Broads boat, departing in 8 minutes.
Trainee skipper here at Broad Stores is going to be learning to drive this boat throughout the year and hopefully driving it all summer long. So we're going to let him have a bit of a steer and I'm going to be more of the commentator for the trip. I'm going to do a commentary for half of it as we cruise on down the River Bure. We're going to visit a couple of Broads, talk a bit about the history of the area and look out for some wildlife along the way as well. So I hope that sounds good. My commentary is going to last for half of the trip and then I'll be nice and quiet on the way back and just let you enjoy the peace and quiet, okay? We've also got Amanda on board as well, one of our new crew members. She's going to be downstairs at the bar for most of the trip, so if anyone fancies a drink or a snack, we've got a coffee machine and all sorts down there, so do go pay her a visit. Now before we get underway, there's a quick safety brief to run through, so please listen up. In the unlikely event of an emergency, you'll be notified by means of an announcement. Please remain calm and comply with all directions given by myself and the crew. Emergency exits in the upper and lower saloon are marked with green and white signs, and the boat also carries the appropriate life-saving apparatus, which in the event of an emergency can be launched manually or will float free if required. In the interest of safety, will adults please ensure small children are accompanied at all times? I don't think we got any on board today, so ignore that one. And due to current legislation, the boat's classified as non-smoking. That also includes the use of electronic cigarettes as well. Now please make sure not to throw any rubbish over the side. We've got designated bins on board. There's also 2 toilets. One's upstairs about halfway down the saloon, and then there's another one downstairs where you boarded the boat. The bar itself is located downstairs, that's where you'll find Amanda, and she'll be opening that up around 5 minutes after we leave the moorings. And that's covered it all, ladies and gentlemen, so thanks very much for listening. I'm just going to wait for the Queen of the Broads here to get properly moored up, and then we're going to get underway. Thank you.
So just leaving now. Hour-and-a-half boat trip.
That makes up the Norfolk Broads National Park, and it flows for about 25 miles downstream from here, all the way down to Great Yarmouth, where it then joins a large estuary called Great Water, and eventually flows out to sea. And first of all, let's talk a bit about the history of our boatyard itself. It's quite an old boatyard. It was founded in 1878 by a man called John Loynes, and he got the idea of setting up the boatyard when he started taking his friends out in his own dinghy. Now they were all quite amazed by the beauty of the Broads. They wanted to keep stopping off, seeing all the sights as you would if you were new to the area. John realised there was a bit of a gap in the market here in the Broads at the time, so we started up the boatyard under the name of Faircraft Lloyd's. Then a few years down the line, in 1935, a retired bank manager called Charles Hannaford made his way to the Broads and decided to start the company Broads Tours. Now you can imagine he must have really enjoyed life here on the Broads to want to set that up even in his retirement years. And the fleet of passenger vessels we've had here at Broad Stores has changed quite some bit over the years. We used to have lots of single-decker boats that could even make it under the bridge behind us, but I wouldn't fancy trying that in one of these because we've got 4 big double-deckers now. We've got the Queen of the Broads, which just moored up beside us. That's the biggest boat on the Norfolk Broads, that one. Also got the Cordon Rouge, the Vintage Broadsman, and of course the Belle of the Broads, which we're on today. Okay, so we're about to go past a very special house on the right hand side. It's called Barton House, and it's special for two reasons. The first one is that it's home to the Wherry Yacht Charter Trust, so that's why we've got this absolutely lovely old historic sailing boat out on display today. This one's called the Ardea. The second reason it's quite a cool place though is that there's a miniature steam train that runs from here. You might be able to just catch a glimpse of the train tracks over the back of the Ardea there, so it's quite interesting. Sometimes they open up to the public for trips as well. Now the wherries, we can see another one there, that's the Wherry Olive as well, much smaller. Lovely to see them both out on display today, really lucky. The wherry started off by taking cargo all around the Broadland villages. Okay, so then road and railway transport made its way to the area, which was a lot quicker. And it started putting the wherrymen out of business, as you can imagine. So what they did is they added a cabin on top of their boat, and they called it a pleasure wherry instead. Therefore the new generation of wherry was born, the second generation known as the pleasure wherry. And the Ardea back there, the bigger one, is a perfect example of a pleasure wherry that would have been out running river trips just like we're doing today. Now the third and final generation of wherry was called the Wherry Yacht, and they're a lot smaller, just like the Olive that we saw back there at the Trust as well. So the reason they're so much smaller is because they were actually built and designed to be holiday boats instead, so people could actually hire them out and come on a sailing holiday, and that actually made them the first holiday cruisers here on the Norfolk Broads. Now there used to be hundreds of wherries really sailing around this area at one time. There's only 8 remaining nowadays, so there's not many left. 5 of them are actually kept right there at the Trust though, so it's really nice that we have that piece of Norfolk history right here on our doorstep. It also makes it all the more special, doesn't it, that we've already seen 2 of them, so we've seen a quarter of all the wherries and we haven't even left the village yet. And over the years, lots of the original houses that would have once stood along the river have been replaced with more modern designs, such as the very impressive Brynwood just coming up on the right here. Always catches some eyes, can't really miss it. Massive house, even has its own little boating lake out here with a mute swan in there today. Still a few old traditional homes left. In fact, the oldest one left along this stretch of the river is called Leisure Hour. It's just coming up on the left-hand side here, the blue and white one. It does a good job in showing us what the traditional homes from the blocks look like. And it's actually available as a holiday rental nowadays. You can go and stay there for a week if you want to. You have to put up with me driving past and talking about it every day though. Right next to the oldest house in the village, we've also got the newest one here coming up on the left. About 6 years old now. I think it's done a pretty good job of replacing the old wooden run-down shed that used to stand on that land before it. Very nice property. And as we cruise on past the villages of Wroxham on our right-hand side and Houghton on our left, it becomes clear why the area is so popular among tourists and locals alike. We Norfolk folk are very lucky to have this national park right here on our doorstep. Especially all the lucky homeowners who get to wake up to this view every morning, but you might get bored of it. Now I heard some of you on board the coach today have already been down into the main part of the village, so you might have noticed the abundance of Roy's logos plastered all over the place. You might have been into Roy's. It looks like the whole village has been taken over by a man called Roy, but that's not quite the case. Roy's is a department store. It's set up by 2 brothers, Alfred and Arnold Roy, but in the nearby village of Coltishall to begin with, actually, about 5 miles down the road. But they soon moved it to Houghton and Wroxham when they saw how well the tourism industry was doing here. Nowadays they've got 12 stores across Norfolk and Suffolk. Most of them are still kept right here, But it might surprise you to learn that despite going by the name of Roy's of Wroxham, most of the stores are actually in Houghton, because the two villages are actually split by the River Bure. Got a couple of oyster catchers there on the right hand side as well, the long orange beaks.
Oh yeah.
So hopefully we'll have plenty of wildlife out today. It seems fairly quiet out on the river, which always helps. You get some more shyer, more elusive species coming out, hopefully. And on the right, we're just about to pass George Formby's old holiday home. I'm told he was a big celebrity back in the day. He used to write and perform comedy songs on the ukulele, sung with the troops in the Second World War, even appeared in a few movies as well. And this is his old place, the big white one, set well back from the river here. He's called Heronby nowadays, which is quite fitting actually, because I just see a grey heron coming out behind that tree there in the garden. You can see him on the right hand side. It used to be named Berraldine though, after his wife Beryl, along with his two boats, the Lady Beryl 1 and 2. Now we've got a couple of my personal favourites just about to come up on the right hand side now. The first one's called High House, you'll see it very shortly. It's got this lovely boat moored up outside as well. But believe it or not, this one used to be an outbuilding. In fact, it was a games room for the even bigger house, which is just about to come into view. So that used to be one giant property. Of course, it's now split into two by this fence here. But the bigger one of the two, that's my all-time favourite around here. So when it went up for sale the other year, I did have a bit of a nosy on Rightmove. Unfortunately, I couldn't quite afford it. Who'd have guessed? But I did manage to find out it's got 7 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, and even a couple of boathouses to keep your toys in as well. So a good size, that one. And that used to be owned by Kevin Keeler. He was an old Norwich City goalkeeper. Grey-leg goose coming up here on the right-hand side, which of course gets its name from being grey in colour, and of course being a goose, but also it lags behind in migration, so that's where the lag bit comes from. In fact, they barely seem to leave the village nowadays. They've found a nice home here in Wroxham. Next up, I want to talk a bit about thatching. As you might have noticed, thatched roofs are still quite popular around this area. Well, we like to build the main body of the thatch from a plant called reed, which grows locally here on the Broads, so it's useful, it's easy to source. And it's also proven to be a very durable material to use for thatching. It lasts you up to 100 years before needing to be fully replaced. But that's not the only material we use, because right at the top of the roof we have what's known as the ridge, which holds it all together. That is made from sausedge, another local plant, which is a lot less brittle than reed. It's more bendy, more flexible, and you can weave it in and out and create these nice decorative patterns that have been etched into the tops of the roofs there. In fact, the buildings on the right here, these three, they all have the same pattern at the top, and that's because the same thatcher would have carried out all of this work, and they all had their own unique design. Okay, so most of the houses along here are built from wood, you might have noticed, rather than brick, and that's of course to keep them nice and light, being on this soft boggy ground near the water. You wouldn't want your house sinking overnight, would you? So they do actually hammer some big steel tubular pilings into the ground when they build a new house here, essentially like big metal stilts underneath all the houses, propping them up. And Gum's just about to take us by the last house in the village here, so keep your eyes on the right hand side for this one. Quite a unique design. They built it over the water, don't know how they got the planning permission for that, and all the wildlife like the swan there, that they can all cut underneath the house and end up on Wroxham Broad on the other side. Get a little glimpse of Wroxham Broad there. Now we are going to be popping onto Wroxham Broad very, very shortly. Although I don't think it'd be very safe to try and fit the middle of the Broads through that little gap, so we're going to take the long way round today instead and play it safe. Muir Marshes National Nature Reserve. This area is known as a triple SI, which stands for a Site of Special Scientific Interest, and it's mostly dominated by alder trees that we can see growing all around us here, with a few types of willow and birch dotted around as well. But alder in particular has adapted really well to the soft, boggy environment here on the Broads. And what it does, instead of rotting away like lots of trees like oak and ashwood and all this wet environment here, it actually gets harder and stronger the more water it's exposed to. So it's a perfect place for it to grow. And as we travel along this area of woodland, just keep your eyes on the low branches found near the water's edge, because that's the ideal place to spot kingfishers. I'm sure we're all hoping to see one on the trip today. In fact, I saw one yesterday, so I know they are around, especially in this area. So if we get lucky, they'll be perched on a branch for us, we can all get a good look at them, but they could also be flying past at about 25 miles an hour, so you might just see a bright blue flash at the corner of your eye. When they go into flight, they do make a short but very loud high-pitched whistle sound, so if you hear that, definitely look out the window. But there's no point looking up high for kingfishers. They like to keep nice and low to the water. They're pretty greedy, you see, so they want to be near to the fish at all times. No, it's actually used as an indicator here on our boats. Okay, we don't have indicator lights, we use the horn instead. So one short blast, as you heard, that means we're going to be turning right or to starboard. 2 short blasts means we're turning left or to port. And 3 short blasts means we're going to be reversing. So in fact you might have heard the 3 blasts as we left the moorings. Now it can be quite funny in the peak of the summertime. There's lots of inexperienced river users out and about, and none of them have really heard of these horn signals, so normally they think they're in trouble when they see us beeping at them. That's not the case at all. And sometimes though they think we're just saying hello when I get a beep back and a wave. You're going to hear another blast of that horn again in a moment. Gum's going to sound it and we're going to head into Wroxham Broad, our first broad of the day. And as we turn into the Broad here, keep your eyes on the right hand side, because we have a Canada goose with the black head and white chin strap here. It's sat on its nest actually, so we have a really good view of that there hiding on the right hand side. And Canada goose made their way to England as an ornamental pet originally for the rich and famous. And so back in the days when you couldn't flaunt your wealth by driving a Ferrari and wearing a Rolex like you can nowadays, you could get foreign geese imported from abroad and just put them out on your front lawn as a decoration instead. That's times have changed. A couple of Egyptian geese flying down the left there as well, flying off into the trees. So let's talk about Wroxham Broad. This is our first broad of the day, and it's quite a large one. It covers a big area, about 120 acres in total. And to look at, you'd assume the broad has been naturally formed, wouldn't you? It's always been here like the River Bere, but that's not quite the case actually. Now this is something that was only discovered in 1960 by a lady called Dr. Joyce Lowder, who was a botanist. She made the remarkable discovery that the Broads themselves, these big lakes, they were actually completely man-made, and they were dug out by nothing but medieval man who spade several years ago. Now that would explain why the Broads are so shallow, this specific one being between 1.5 and 2 metres deep. Now, what was the reason for all of this digging? Well, it was mostly to obtain cant, which is of course a plant matter. It was used as a common source of fuel back then. They didn't have any coal available in the area. They didn't have means of importing it. And wood was considered a precious building material for houses and ships. They didn't want to burn all that. So the best solution was to dig it out of the ground in its masses, dry it, and then burn it to use for cooking and heating and things like that. There's a great crested grebe down there on our right hand side as well. You might just see him swimming off with the orange head feathers. Two of them, in fact, one's just popped up, so lovely to see them. We're hoping we're going to see a few more of them on today's trip, so we'll go back to them later on. We're going to stick to the origins of the Broads for now. So yeah, so they were all digging sites for peat. And peat digging was an idea that was first introduced by the Vikings, and it soon developed into a major industry here on the Broads. But there was a bit of a problem. Over the years, the pits began to fill with water. That was mostly due to a rise in sea level, due to global warming, and that was affecting the heights of the rivers as they all flow out to sea as well, of course. Now, by the 14th century, all these digging sites had to be completely abandoned due to the flooding, but it is the flooding of these sites that's resulted in the Broads as we know and love them today, so I suppose it's not turned out too badly for us in the end. And you might be wondering what the word Broad actually means. Where does it come from? Well, unfortunately, no one's 100% sure, but we think it comes from the Anglo-Saxon word broodinger, which means the widening or the broadening of a river. Many sailing boats out today. There's one directly ahead of us at the other end of the Broad, but it's often very full of them. And that's because we have the Norfolk Broads Yacht Club here coming up on the right hand side. Now, the Norfolk Broads Yacht Club are quite well known for hosting major regattas, which is like a series of races, one of which is really well known, called Wroxham Week. They hold that in the last week of July every single year, and you can trace it all the way back to 1888. Back then it was known as the Wroxham Water Frolic, which I think is a brilliant name for it. And in fact, it's been held on Wroxham Broad every single year since, apart from the one time when it was cancelled in 2020 due to COVID, along with everything else at the time. I don't think we need to remind anyone of that, do we? But the Yacht Club is also a brilliant place for sailing novices to learn and practice as well. We've had loads of youngsters out here over the Easter holidays learning to sail on little boats called optimists. And so if anyone does know of any locals in the area that might want to get into sailing, I'm told this is a brilliant place to go. In the area without talking a bit more about the wherries, can we? So we got very lucky earlier. We saw two wherries back at the Wherry of Charter Trust. We saw the Olive, and they've also home to the Narada and the Whitemouth, which are very similar in design to that one, smaller boats made for holiday makers for their wherry yachts. They also look after the Hartor and of course the Ardea that we saw, which are the pleasure wherries built for carrying people on river trips instead. And then you've also got another pleasure wherry called the Solace as well. We often see that out and about because it's privately owned. Only one family seems to be able to afford one. I guess that's why there's only one that's privately owned. You've got two original trading wherries as well. They're called the Albion and the Rock. Big black sail, the old traditional black sail, along with a painted black hull. So if you see any black sails out with the Broads today, guys, don't worry, I don't think we've got any pirates around. I'm sure it'll just be a pleasure wherry. Okay, so of course there's some more Canada geese over there. There's also a crossbreed, that's the one closest to us, between a Canada goose and a greylag goose. You can see the head feathers are much lighter in colour. Okay, as we exit the Broad, there's going to be a small reed bed coming up on your right hand side, so keep an eye out for that. We've spoken a bit already about reed and how it's harvested for thatching. There's another short blast of the horn. So as Gum's displayed there, we're going to be turning right now. We're going to be heading back onto the River Bure, and we just going to make our way a bit further downstream and head on to the inner southwest route. So some of our reed is still harvested for thatching, like we discussed, but unfortunately that trade's a bit under threat now due to the cheaper imports becoming available from abroad. And that's a bit of a shame really, because the reed that we have here in Norfolk is actually really high quality, and lots of it would have been exported across Europe back in the popular days of thatching. The reed and sedge cutting is also very important for wildlife. We're very lucky on the Broads, we're home to 25% of the UK's rarest species. That includes things like the Norfolk corky dragonfly, the bittern, and of course the swallowtail butterfly, which is the largest and rarest butterfly in the UK. Now, when reeding sedge beds were thoroughly cut back and well maintained, and everyone had a thatched roof at the time, that left the area very clean and tidy, and it allowed a plant called milk parsley to grow within amongst the reed beds, which you'll only find here in Norfolk. But it also happens to be the only plant that swallowtail caterpillars will actually eat. That's why they only get big in this part of the country. And the problem was when the demand for reed and sedge was dropping off and thatching was a lot less popular, that meant the reed beds started to get a bit overgrown really, and it became difficult for those swallowtails to get to their food source. So luckily we've recognised the importance of regular reed and sedge bed maintenance nowadays. That's getting cut back regularly to ensure the well-being of those butterflies. But of course the reed beds are also a habitat to many species here on the Broads, and they also serve as a bit of a natural buffer as well against wash, which is like the waves created by boats. Which leads us onto the next subject quite nicely, which is going to be speed limits. So you might have noticed we're travelling nice and slowly on today's trip. That's because we have speed limits that are enforced by the Broads Authority. We often see the rangers out and about on the water, they're policing it really, making sure everyone's behaving themselves. And the reason they've got such a big problem with the boats going too quick is because the big wave they create just hits the riverbanks day after day and will slowly erode them back. Now that leads to things like trees falling into the water and the destruction of habitats in the wave as well. Now where the reed beds will happen a little bit, it's not going to completely stop the problem. In areas like this where there are no reed beds, you can see how destroyed really the riverbanks are, how uneven they are on both sides of the river here. So it's very important to keep nice and slow. So back in the village it was just 4 miles an hour. We didn't want to get in trouble for flooding anyone's gardens. And now that we're out onto the main river, we can really unleash the power of these engines, can't we? We're currently in the 5 mile an hour zone. As I said, there's 7 rivers that make up the Norfolk Broads National Park, and there's also 63 shallow lakes as well, of course known as the Broads themselves. But out of this big number of 63 Broads, only 13 of them are actually fully navigable nowadays. Yeah, that's 1, 3, 13. That's because lots of them are privately owned, and some of them have just silted up over the years. They've become far too shallow for boating activity, so it'd be too dangerous to head onto there today. An example of that is coming up here on the right hand side. Hiding behind the trees we have a quaint little Broad here called the Polk. We'll just about be able to make it out over the tops of the lower trees just coming up here. And we know it's shallow because, well, water lilies have already started to grow in it, just be able to see. Now in the summer months it'll be completely covered in these water lilies, and they're a really good indicator of shallow water. So that's quite handy in the summer, because I know where to stay well clear of driving the boat. They're also a really good indicator of very clear, and something right here looking after the walls. It's good. But that wasn't always quite the case. In fact, back in the 70s and the 80s, this was looked very different to how it does today. We had quite a big pollution problem at the time. Now, lots of the issue came from the fact that boats at the time had just dumped all their sewage waste from their toilets on board straight into the River Bure. So there was no legal requirement for a holding tank whatsoever. That's the first thing. But also farmers were using nasty fertilisers and things like that back in the day. And it was all getting washed down into the rivers during heavy rainfall. Now, a mixture of all these contaminants in the water caused a thick layer of algae to grow over the surface. And as well as looking ugly to the holiday makers and putting people off booking boating holidays, it actually posed quite a serious threat to the wildlife as well. And what it meant is that the oxygen and the sunlight could no longer break beneath the surface. So that was a big problem for the fish and the water plants and things like that, and they all started to die out. And that therefore affected things further up the food chain like birds as well. Thankfully we've got the Broads Authority nowadays. We spoke about them a bit earlier. They're not just out to catch you for speeding and tell you off. They actually do a very good job in maintaining this area. They roll out several projects through the year to keep it nice and clean, well looked after. And also several rules have come into place thanks to them over the years for us all to follow as well. And it goes without saying that we've all got sewage tanks on board our boats now. In fact, Gunn would know that firsthand. He had the lovely job of pumping it out this morning. So look out for that. It is very little, as the name suggests. And why are the Broads all such different sizes, you might be wondering, first of all? Well, that's because the small ones like this... Oh, sorry, there's a cormorant in there as well with a fish in its mouth. That's there. Good news with that. So the small ones like this, they'd have been used as a supply of food for just a single village, maybe, or a very large family. But the bigger ones like Wroxham Broad and Hickling Broad, well, they would have been used as a more of a mass production site. Salhouse Little Broad is privately owned. It's owned by the Cater family. They own lots of land around this area, including Salhouse Broad, the bigger version as well. But thankfully they've opened that one up to the public now, so we can go and have a look at that later on in our trip. But they also own the entire village of Woodbaswick as well, about a 10-minute drive from Wroxham. I think it's well worth a visit personally. It's home to one of my personal favourite spots around here. That would of course be the Woodfords Brewery. So you might have heard of Woodfords before. Lovely local Norfolk microbrewery, brewing ales, ciders, lagers, all sorts. They do actually run brewery tours, I'm told, as well, on certain days of the week. But the best bit is, in my opinion, they've got a pub on site there called the Fur and Feather. You can head down there and try all the local beers for yourself, and maybe grab some lunch while you're at it as well. So if you're ever back in the area, I think it's definitely well worth a visit. Or maybe have a word with a coach driver, see if you can take a detour. So it's this part of the trip that we really are surrounded by the Broads, because we've got Salhouse Broad on the right. We're going to be heading in there soon. You might catch a glimpse of the trees there. However, on the left-hand side, we've actually for quite some time been following Houghton Great Broad, a really big broad, out of sight unfortunately at the moment. We'll catch a glimpse into it later on in the trip. Now unfortunately we can't go on Houghton Great Broad on the journey today. In fact, we'll never be able to, because it's been closed off for over 100 years to boating activity. So that might sound like a bit of a shame at first, but the truth is it's not all bad news, because it means that all the rare and elusive species that live in the area can just hide away here. And they've got a safe haven here away from all the boating activity. So that makes it a really good place for spotting that rarer wildlife. And you wouldn't be completely out of luck if you ever want to come and visit it, because they've actually built a nature trail here, and the moorings to which are on the left-hand side. So there's a big old boardwalk that goes around the Broad now, and lots of nice viewpoints to look out onto the Broad, see if you can spot any wildlife. And I'm quite lucky, I've been there several times with Broad stores, because we actually run educational school trips down at the trail here during term time. We bring the local school kids out and teach them a bit about the local Broad and wildlife and ecology. And my favourite bit of the trail is probably the bird hive. It looks out on itself. They built a nesting platform there in recent years, specifically for the common terns to use, which is a species of bird that comes all the way from Africa every single year, around this time of year actually, to start breeding. So I look forward to seeing them when they come back over the next couple of weeks, I imagine. There's another grey lag goose on the left hand side, if anyone didn't see it earlier. And like I say, it's been opened up to the public by the Katie family, and then all the fees they generate from moorings and things like that, they're able to put that into the maintenance of the moorings. So quite a good arrangement, I think. You would have just heard one more short blast of the horn there even. Of course, we're going to head into Southwest Broad. Okay, so welcome to Salhouse Broad. This one's a little bit different to the others. Whereas most of them were dug out for their peats and they're all boggy and muddy underneath, this one's a bit of an exception. It was dug out for sand and gravel instead, resulting in this lovely beach area coming up very shortly on your left-hand side. Now that is a great place for people to come on a sunny day out. Of course, it attracts lots of visitors. I've just taken over for a second because I've spotted a great crested green nest just coming up very shortly. I'm going to get it on everyone's left hand side, so just bear with me, we're just going to manoeuvre the boat so you can get the best possible view. But going back to the beach ahead of us here, loads of people come down here when the sun's out and you can enjoy a swim if you believe it. And if you don't fancy that, and I don't really blame you, you can always hire out a canoe or a kayak from the moorings there. You come and explore the water pace. Okay, so this is a great place for spotting wildlife. Of course, we've got the nest coming up here on the left. So hopefully everyone's able to get a good view. It's just behind this shallow water marker here on the left-hand side. And you've got great crested grebes sat on the top of it there. So great crested grebes nearly went extinct in the 19th century. They were hunted for those lovely orange head feathers that they got there. They would have been used in things like ladies' headwear at the time as a bit of a fashion accessory, sadly. But remarkably, a group of ladies called the Fur, Fin and Feather Folk managed to launch a successful campaign in order to protect this endangered species. And they later went on to become known as the RSPB, which we of course know them as today. But back then they were called the Fur, Fin and Feather Folk. Bit of a mouthful. The reason the nest is in the water is because great crested grebes can actually never come to land. Their feet are so far back on their body that they find it impossible to walk. So they're really good at swimming, rubbish at walking. So they have to build floating nests out of things like twigs and leaves, as we saw back there. During the Second World War, there was many of them around at the time, and they were a rescue boat. Now the reason it's here on Salhouse Broad is that it's been sunken for many years. It's recently been refloated last year. It's just being held here for storage at the moment. And the plan is there's a charity that's trying to raise some money at the moment. They're going to try and rebuild this boat back to how it would have once looked. Give it a bit of a restoration project. And it's a tribute really to the men that would have served on it during the war. It's a lot quicker by road than it is by river, of course. And from the car park, you can wander down the nature trail. It takes about 10 minutes through woodland that brings you out onto the sandy beach area. And then from there, if you don't fancy braving the water, there's plenty of walking to do. In fact, there's a nice boardwalk through the trees here to the right-hand side that's been installed. There's a kids' play area as well, so something for the whole family. Even a food and drink van which parks up at the top of the hill, just here coming to view right there. Now, there's a few boat moorings along here, as you can see. There's a few boats here today, but in the summer this will be absolutely jam-packed every single night, or every single evening at least, because lots of people like to stay here overnight. It's a really popular place to moor up for the night. There's also a campsite just on the other side of the hill there as well. Very shortly we're going to be passing that nest again. It's going to be on your right hand side this time. That's literally just been up in the last couple of days. I think it was 2 days ago now that we noticed it for the first time. There.
Yes, the water, yeah.
And I do hope you enjoyed that trip onto Salhouse Broad. We're just going to make our way towards the exit of the Broad now, and of course we'll be turning left this time, making our way back towards the village. Also, there's an Egyptian goose here as well. We haven't really spoken about them. That's the bird there with the brown eye patch. Now, despite the name, they're actually not a goose. They're part of the shelduck family, and their population in Egypt is very small as well. So it's a bit of a random name. But the reason they were given it in the first place is because they were thought to have been a sacred bird by the ancient Egyptians, who used to worship them, and you might recognise them from the old hieroglyphics.
I don't think that would be best, but really good news. And it just, but things can go wrong.
And we're just about to head past the Wherry Yacht Charter Trust again. It's going to be on our left-hand side this time. You'll get a lovely view of both the Olive and Ardea once again. So that means we're nearly back in the boatyard now, so I'd just like to say on behalf of myself, Gum and Amanda, thank you very much for joining us. We do hope you've enjoyed your trip today, and we'd love to hear from you on Google Reviews or TripAdvisor as well. We'd like to know everything we've done well, of course, and what we could improve upon for next time. Now, all that's really left to say is please stay remaining in your seats for the last few corners of the journey and whilst we tie the boat up. And when we are all safely moored up...
So coming back to Wroxham now, arriving back at Wroxham. Thank you for watching the Norfolk Boards boating tour, board tours with audio commentary.